Man is not hit hardest by his enemy, but by his trusted friend. Everything changed in just 48 hours. The man I trusted took away not only our joint account, but control of my life, and I kept silent as if nothing had happened until that day. My name is Ethan Sullivan. I'm 42 years old. I was born and raised in a quiet suburb of Albany in upstate New York. I came from a middle-class family. My father was a high school teacher and my mother was a nurse. I learned the value of money at an early age and grew up counting every penny. I was a successful student and studied finance at Boston University. The 4 years there were the most important period that shaped my life. I was the quietest in my class, but I was also the hardest worker. After graduation, I went to Wall Street. For the first few years, I lived like an intern. Sleepless nights, analysis until the wee hours of the morning, endless demands from the bosses. But that period matured me. I learned what discipline was there. I worked in 3 big investment banks for 10 years. Risk analysis, portfolio management, capital raising. I opened myself to learn more in every subject I deepened. But at some point I realized this. Every dollar that big companies earned was becoming equal to what they were losing to people. At that point I decided to start my own consulting company. The year was 2015. Ethan Sullivan Associates was born, but it wasn't a path I traveled alone. I had Derek Coleman with me. When I first met Derek, we were both in our early 30s. I was analytical, and he was a strong communicator. He would build warm relationships with the client, and I would strategize in the back. We satisfied every client we worked with, meeting our targets 2 years early. We were so compatible that people started calling us the twins of finance. But it wasn't just our business partnership that was so strong. Over time, Derek became part of my family. When my son was born, I gave him godfatherhood without a second thought. When I got married, he was my wedding witness. During a difficult time with my husband, he was the one who lived with us in the same house and brought us back together. We planned our vacations together. Our children grew up together. So much so that when I had to make a decision, I would ask him first, not myself. He had entered my life so deeply that we had already erased the line between friendship and brotherhood. I chose to trust him, but sometimes even the deepest bonds open the deepest wounds. It all started with a business trip. I was in San Diego for a 2-day financial summit. Derek and I exchanged a few messages during the conference and everything seemed fine. He even told me that the office was doing great, that the client relationships were even stronger than before. I trusted him because why would I be suspicious? We had a 7-year partnership, a 20-year friendship. But when I returned to New York, as soon as I stepped into the office, I felt something was very wrong. The secretary at the door was gone. It was quiet. It was as if everyone had vanished into thin air. The first thing I noticed was that the company cards were not working. It seemed like a trivial detail at first, maybe a technical problem. But then I saw that both safes inside the office had been opened and emptied completely. At that moment, I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. When I sat down at my computer and checked the systems, I found an even bigger disaster. The contracts with our main clients had already been canceled. It was as if someone had systematically wiped everything out, leaving no trace. Still, I was looking for crumbs of hope. Maybe it was a mistake, I told myself. But a bank notification that night shattered everything to an account in the Cayman Islands that I had never even known existed. $3.2 million was transferred. The digital signature on the transfer order belonged to Derek Coleman. My hands shook. My mind froze, not my heart. I stared at the screen like I was staring at a blank wall. No anger, no tears, just an indescribable emptiness. Then suddenly, I went back in time like a movie. The moment we cut my son's birthday cake together, his voice telling me to appreciate her. When my wife and I had a fight, it was all a lie. They were all silent steps in a grand plan. In that moment, one thing became clear to me. This was not a momentary mistake. It was the final scene of a cold-blooded betrayal, and I was no longer just a deceived person. I had become a person whose revenge took shape in silence. In the first days, I didn't say a word to anyone. Not my wife, not my colleagues, not my lawyer whom I had trusted for years. I didn't even think of going to the police, because my instincts whispered something. This wasn't just a scam. This was a personal battle, and I had to win it on the chessboard, not in the courtroom. My first move was to stay calm. I put my emotions aside and focused on the data. Digital traces, emails, CRM records, customer calendars, Zoom calls. Every piece, no matter how small it seemed, was potential evidence. I worked nights, pretended to be normal during the day. No one in the office noticed the storm raging inside me. On the outside, I was still Ethan Sullivan, cool, professional, in control. But inside something else was being born. A counter plan. A plan to give Derek back not only what I'd lost, but the identity he'd made me forget. First, I had to regain the reputation that had been stolen, so I contacted former clients one-on-one. I didn't explain anything to them, I just listened. I realized that Derek's new company, Coleman Ventures, was copying our strategies exactly. The presentations were the same. The slides, the samples, even the consulting proposals were as if they had come from my pen. It wasn't just money he was stealing. It was my brain, my identity, my future. At that point, I made my decision. The war would be fought with the same weapons, but I would attack from a different dimension. I secretly contacted a hacker group. I didn't ask for anything illegal. I just asked them to analyze public data, metadata analysis, digital network connections. I wanted to see the vulnerability at the foundation of the empire that Derek was building step by step. And I did. It was hollow. The system was baseless. It was shiny on the surface, but it had no depth. That's when I decided I was going to realize an idea that had been sitting on a dusty shelf for years. An artificial intelligence-based financial analysis system for individual investors. The project, which I called premature at the time, was now right on time. I named it Echo, because this system would be born out of the echo of my betrayal, not just technology. It would be an answer, a message. The more you steal, the more I'm reborn. I spent nights writing code. I used my network. I built new, stronger bridges to replace the erased connections. And I waited for the perfect time to launch Echo, because some battles make no sound, only echoes. 3 months later, Derek announced a big launch on the New York Stock Exchange. Leaks to the press talked about a huge pie of profits to be distributed to investors. Huge partnerships. But on the same day I launched Echo, quietly, unpretentiously, but jarringly. Because I wasn't selling a product, I was spreading an echo. At 7:45 that morning, the first headline in the national media was, Derek Coleman's Cayman accounts under scrutiny, suspected tax evasion. I didn't speak at that moment. The lawyers did not speak. Justice spoke. The wheels of the system started turning. One by one, clients started suing him. Investors pulled out of the project. Within 2 weeks, Coleman Ventures filed for bankruptcy. For him, it wasn't just a company going under. A reputation, an identity, a future destroyed. But the worst blow came in court. I was called to testify. When I entered the courtroom, he looked away. But I looked directly into his eyes, and I said perhaps the simplest but most powerful sentence of my life. When you betrayed me, I was reborn. Silence. It was as if we were the only ones in that hall at that moment. Neither the voice of the judge, nor the clicking of the pens. Just an echo of the past. From that day on, people didn't just call me financial advisor. They called me the man who turned betrayal into power. Many young entrepreneurs were inspired by me before they realized their ideas. But I knew one thing very well. Sometimes losing is the only way to start over. Because where you fall, you'll find the best ground to get back on your feet. If this story moved you, leave your thoughts in the comments. If you have experienced a similar betrayal in your life, this could be your story too. And if you want more of this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe. Because here we are not just telling stories, we are telling the real face of life.